This is Edith and Jacob's wedding being postponed for the 33rd time, because she was hit by a car on the eve of the wedding. She suffered fractures in 19 places throughout her body, was admitted to the ICU 3 times, and only then did she finally stabilize. When she was feeling a bit better, she leaned against the wall and wanted to take a walk in the hallway. Just as she reached the corner, she overheard her fiancé Jacob talking with a friend. Last time it was drowning. This time it was getting hit by a car, delaying the wedding for another 2 months. What method are you planning to use next time? At the corner, Edith felt as if all the blood in her body had frozen upon hearing this. Jacob wore a white lab coat, idly playing with his phone as he spoke in a calm tone. We won't postpone it, a friend expressed surprise. So you're just going to accept your fate and marry Edith? What about that intern Evelyn under you? When Edith was sent to Jonathan's house as a child, my father told me to be good to her because we were going to get married someday, so I've taken care of her like a wife since we were young. And it even became a habit until I met Evelyn. At this point, a flicker of amusement appeared in his eyes. Although she comes from a difficult background, she never accepts her fate and has always been resilient. I noticed her the moment I first saw her. If you like her so much, why not go after her? His friend couldn't understand his hesitation at all. The air fell silent for a few seconds before Jacob looked down and spoke. Edith's mother once did a great favor for the Jonathan family. She is my responsibility, and those 33 times were my struggle. Now it's time for me to shoulder this responsibility. As for Evelyn, being able to watch her from afar is enough for me. I dare not ask for anything more. Every word felt like a sharp sword piercing Edith's heart. She had to lean against the wall just to steady herself. She felt an itch on her face and reached up to touch it, only to realize they were tears. Edith didn't listen any further, stumbling back to the hospital room, tears silently streaming down her face. She never could have imagined that all 33 accidents were orchestrated by Jacob. The first time, she was accidentally injured in a crowd fight and was stabbed. The second time, she was bitten by a snake in her garden and nearly died from poisoning. The third time, Jacob took her hiking, where she accidentally fell and spent half a month in the ICU, and all of this was because he didn't want to marry her. Her engagement to Jacob had actually been arranged since she was 10 years old. At that time, the Jonathan family faced investigation and the threat of imprisonment due to a scandal. It was her mother, who worked as an accountant, who took the blame for everything, allowing the Jonathan family to survive. As a result, the patriarch of the Jonathan family took her into the Jonathan household and arranged her engagement to Jacob as a form of security for her. Since childhood, Jonathan's family including Jacob had been very good to her, supporting her in everything she did. Even the band that was looked down upon by the upper circles, they were all very supportive, so she firmly believed they must be in love. But she never expected it was all out of a sense of duty, and that his heart belonged to someone else. The dull ache in her heart sharpened into a twisting knife, the pain tugging at all the wounds throughout her body. 10 minutes later, Jacob came in to clean her wounds. Seeing her slightly reddened eyes, he paused and asked, "What's wrong? Are your wounds hurting again?" Looking at his concerned expression, all she could think about was that word responsibility, which stabbed at her heart, making it ache with a dull pain. Her pain receptors were more sensitive than most people's, so even for wound cleaning, she needed anesthesia. Just as Jacob picked up the anesthesia to administer it, his phone rang. He set the anesthesia down and answered the call. Looking at the cartoon charm hanging from his phone, she was reminded of the past. That was the first time her band won a competition, and the prize was a pendant. She joyfully gave it to him, only for him to casually toss it into the back of a drawer. "It's too childish," he said, frowning. But now, hanging from his phone was a cartoon pendant identical to Evelyn's, swinging back and forth, making her eyes ache. The voice from the phone spilled into the quiet hospital room, and Evelyn's voice came through. "Teacher, I've encountered a patient here and I'm a bit unsure. Could you come over for a moment?" As soon as these words were spoken, Edith could feel Jacob's entire aura brighten considerably. "All right, I'll be right there." His voice was light and cheerful. She had once thought these were just acts of kindness toward an intern, but looking back now, she realized the feelings had always been there, leaving traces all along. Jacob hung up the phone, his hand bypassing the anesthesia and directly picking up the debridement tools. A sharp pain radiated from the wound throughout her body. She let out a muffled groan, her head spinning from the agony as cold sweat poured down like rain. She spoke in a trembling voice, "Jacob, the anesthetic hasn't been applied yet." Jacob continued his work without stopping, absent-mindedly reassuring her, "This way it's more effective. Anesthetic would interfere with the medicine's potency. Just bear with it a little longer." Edith winced as her body convulsed from the pain, her hands gripping the sheets beneath her so tightly they nearly tore. Her voice carried a hint of pleading. "Jacob, can you give me anesthesia? I'm really in so much pain. Be good." Bear with it a little longer, it'll be over soon. He quickened his movements. A few minutes later, after the wound debridement was finished, Jacob threw the items onto the tray. Meanwhile, Edith was already in so much pain that she collapsed onto the bed. From her tilted perspective, she saw him walking away hurriedly. Actually, the anesthesia wouldn't hinder the medication's effect at all. He did this just to get to Evelyn's side quickly, unwilling to even wait out the 5-minute duration of the anesthesia. In an instant, her heart felt as if being twisted by a knife, tears streaming down the corners of her eyes onto the pristine white sheets. The intense pain continued to torment her relentlessly until her vision went black and she fainted outright. When she woke up again, Edith found several people gathered around her, all in turns under Jacob's supervision, including Evelyn. She propped herself up on the bed. "What are you all doing here?" A man with an honest-looking face spoke up. "The teacher said to use you as the demonstration subject and asked us to come over first." The person next to him nudged him with an elbow. "Why are you explaining so much to her? Someone who uses a favor to demand repayment doesn't deserve us being this nice to her." Edith's face paled a little. If it were before, she would never have reacted to these words. But now what they said was actually true. It was precisely because she was using a favor to demand repayment that Jacob was trapped by her side. That's right, if it weren't for her, the teacher could pursue his true love. As she spoke, her gaze fell upon Evelyn standing in the center, her words carrying a pointed implication. Edith looked at Evelyn's somewhat embarrassed face. Feeling as if her heart had been pricked, someone suddenly clapped their hands and said, "Do you think her mother might have willingly offered herself just so her daughter could marry the teacher? After all, with the teacher's family background, they could never hope to reach such status even if they worked their whole lives." Others chimed in one after another. "So that's how it is. It turns out neither mother nor daughter are good people, and her mother is especially malicious." Edith clenched her hand into a fist. It didn't matter what they said about her, she knew she was in the wrong and was willing to take it. But back then, her mother had willingly taken the blame entirely out of gratitude for the kindness Jonathan's family had shown them, without the slightest intention of seeking anything in return. As their words grew increasingly sharp and sarcastic, she couldn't allow her mother to be slandered like this. She stood up and raised her hand, ready to slap the one who was speaking the most gleefully. Nearby, Evelyn caught sight of Jacob about to enter from the corner of her eye. She stepped forward and placed herself in front of that person. With a sharp crack, the slap landed on Evelyn's face, and Edith froze in surprise. Jacob walked in just in time to see this scene. He rushed forward in 2 steps, wrapped his arm around Evelyn, and forcefully pushed Edith away. His voice was filled with anger. "Edith, what are you doing?" She was stunned by his shout, looking at him in disbelief. Jacob had never spoken to her in such a harsh tone before. Jacob did not meet her gaze, his eyes full of heartache as he took Evelyn out to get her wounds treated. 10 minutes later, Jacob returned, and the first thing he said was, "Go apologize to Evelyn." Edith tilted her head to the side and remained silent. "You've been far too spoiled all these years," he said sternly. Her entire body stiffened for a moment. Her eyes stung as she turned to look at him. "They were the ones who said I was using past favors to demand repayment, that my mother took the blame just to climb up the Jonathan family. Besides, I wasn't trying to hit Evelyn, she was the one who stepped in front." There wasn't a hint of relaxation in his eyes, his voice cooling slightly. "Is what they said wrong?" Edith's pupils constricted sharply, her breath caught, her eyes filled with disbelief. Hurt and sorrow nearly overwhelmed her. Yes. Hadn't he always thought this way? Otherwise, he wouldn't have kept hurting her to delay the wedding, and he wouldn't have said it was just a matter of responsibility. She lowered her head and curled her lips in self-mockery. "Fine, I'll go apologize." Edith dragged her nearly broken body, following Jacob to his office. Pushing open the door, she saw Evelyn sitting alone in the office chair and froze for a moment, thinking of the past. At that time, she wanted to pick Jacob up from work. He said he had something to do and would be working late, and she said she could wait for him in the office, but he said, "My office contains important documents, I can't leave anyone alone inside." Yet Evelyn could stay there alone, so it seems a man's principles only apply to those he doesn't like. In front of someone he likes, they mean nothing. Suppressing the dense, piercing pain in her heart, she walked up to Evelyn, lowered her head, and said, "I'm sorry, I accidentally hit you earlier." Evelyn feigned surprise, covering her mouth. "Mrs. Jonathan." Jacob walked over to her, patted her head somewhat displeased. "We're not married yet. No need to call her Mrs. Jonathan." When others used to call Edith Mrs. Jonathan, he never corrected them. But now with Evelyn he starts correcting. Was it because he didn't want to hear that term from his beloved's mouth? A trace of bitterness flashed in her eyes. Evelyn obediently hummed in agreement and changed her form of address. "Ms. Edith. You don't need to blame yourself too much, I forgive you." Her magnanimous demeanor finally made Jacob let Edith off. "You can go back now, Get some proper rest. Edith dug her nails deep into her palms, turned around, and left the office. Just a few steps out the door, she was bumped into by someone passing by. She lost her balance and fell to the ground. The pain spread throughout her body, causing cold sweat to cover her forehead. In the office, Jacob's concerned voice came through. Does your face still hurt? Let me apply some more medicine for you. Tears could no longer be held back and burst forth like a dam breaking, falling in strings onto the ground. She covered her mouth to keep any sound from escaping, with only her trembling shoulders betraying her sorrow. The next day, Jacob went to another hospital for an exchange program, taking only one intern with him, Evelyn. During her week in the hospital, interns kept coming to her bedside, saying that Jacob had chosen Evelyn just to take her out to have fun, that he had taken Evelyn out for delicious meals, and that he had brought Evelyn to check out popular spots. They remarked that back in the day, he would never have done any of these things with Edith. She remained silent in response to all these words, but her heart felt as if it were being torn apart. In the end, a sense of relief flashed in her eyes. Jacob, I'm setting you free. After being discharged from the hospital, she went straight to Jonathan's family old house. She wanted to call off the engagement. Mr. Jonathan, I want to break off the engagement. Edith stood in the living room, her tone resolute. Mr. Jonathan was momentarily taken aback. Why so suddenly? Isn't the wedding about to take place? She lowered her gaze, hiding the bitterness in her eyes. Jacob and I are not truly compatible. It's better not to hold each other back. My mother will be released soon, and I want to take her away and spend some quality time with her. Seeing her determination, Mr. Jonathan had no choice but to agree. All right then, I'll arrange the flight tickets and everything. You can leave as soon as your mother is released in half a month. Just then, Jacob's voice suddenly came from behind. Who's leaving? Edith stiffened for a moment and spoke before Mr. Jonathan could say anything. No one. Why are you back? Jacob didn't press further. I heard you were back, so I came to pick you up. Later, Mr. Jonathan asked them to stay for a meal before leaving. At the dining table, Jacob habitually served her food. He never made mistakes in these matters, like picking her up, like serving her food, which was why she had mistaken his actions for genuine affection. Halfway through the meal, Jacob brought up the wedding. Dad, the wedding will proceed as scheduled in 2 weeks. Please remember to notify the guests. Mr. Jonathan was taken aback for a moment, glancing at the two of them. Didn't Edith tell you? Aren't you calling off the engagement? His voice was drowned out by the ringing of a phone. Jacob answered the call, and Edith, sitting right beside him, easily overheard the entire conversation. Teacher, Evelyn has a fever and refuses to leave work. Please come quickly and talk some sense into her. He tightened his grip on his phone, his tone urgent. Keep an eye on her. I'll be right there. After hanging up, he asked Mr. Jonathan, Dad, what were you saying just now? Before Mr. Jonathan could respond, he added, let's talk about it later. I have something urgent to deal with right now. I need to go. With that, he abandoned all sense of decorum, pushing his chair back with a loud screech as he stood up, and strode quickly toward the door. Watching his retreating figure, her heart felt as if gripped by a large hand, a dull ache spreading through her chest. After leaving Jonathan's house, Edith went to the prison. Holding the intercom phone in her hand, she looked at her mother's haggard face through the glass, her nose tingling as she fought back tears. Edith's mom gazed at her excitedly, pressing the phone tightly to her ear with both hands. Edith, all these years, the Jonathan family. Jacob, has he been good to you? She pulled her sleeve to cover the wound and said with a smile, he treats me very well, Mom. Don't worry. Edith's mom felt relieved. Is your wedding going to happen soon? It's a shame I can't attend. We're not getting married. He doesn't like me. Edith tried her best to keep her expression relaxed. Mom, after you're released from prison, let's leave this place. Okay, from now on, I'll always be by your side, just the two of us. Edith's mom looked at her with a pained heart, tears welling up in her eyes. Okay, I'll listen to you, whatever you say. Returning to the empty home, it had been a month and a half since I was last here. Looking at the familiar scene, everything remained the same, yet nothing was as it used to be. She went upstairs and packed up all her belongings. While Jacob and the Jonathan family's gifts to her were left behind, these things never truly belonged to her, and she had no right to dispose of them. That night, Jacob didn't return home at all, only coming back the next afternoon. He returned with a stylist and a makeup artist. There's a medical charity gala later. I'll take you to meet some people. Jacob never hesitated to acknowledge her identity as the daughter-in-law of the Jonathan family in public, because he saw her as a responsibility, and nothing more. After getting ready, Edith walked to the car and tried to open the passenger door, only to find it locked. Then Jacob in the driver's seat spoke up. We're going to pick up Evelyn later. She gets car sick, so you sit in the back. Edith tightened her grip on the door handle. Had he forgotten that she gets car sick too? She lowered her head with a self-mocking smile, silently reaching for the backseat door, after picking up Evelyn. Her first words upon getting in the car were, "Thank you for staying by my side all night yesterday, teacher, otherwise, I wouldn't have recovered so quickly." Jacob looked at her with a doting smile and ruffled her hair. "I'm just glad you're better. You have such a weak constitution, you need to take better care of yourself in the future." The scene pierced Edith's heart, and just then, Evelyn spoke up as if noticing her for the first time, exclaiming in surprise, "Ms. Edith is here too. Then how can I sit here? I'll take the back seat." Jacob started the car. "It's fine, you can sit here." Edith suffered from severe motion sickness and began swallowing sour water halfway through the journey. Fortunately, they arrived at the venue before she became completely car sick. She entered the venue holding Jacob's arm, while Evelyn stayed close by his side. Throughout the entire medical evening event, he did introduce her to many people, but it was merely a brief introduction. He then focused on introducing Evelyn to the medical industry leaders, making her seem more like a supporting role instead. The after effects of motion sickness still lingered, and she didn't want to stay any longer. After saying a word to Jacob, she headed toward the restroom. She stayed outside for half an hour before taking a deep breath and turning back to the venue. But just as she reached the entrance, she saw Jacob holding up a somewhat unsteady Evelyn as they walked upstairs. Her face was flushed, and she was breathing rapidly and unsteadily. His voice was hoarse and strained, as if he was desperately holding back something. "Evelyn, just bear with it a little longer, we're almost there." Edith felt a jolt in her heart and followed them. She trailed them all the way to the upper floor's room area, then watched helplessly as they entered one of the rooms. Edith felt her head buzz, her thoughts completely halting at that moment. What did it mean for them to enter a hotel room? She didn't want to guess. There was still a sliver of hope in her heart. Perhaps he was just escorting Evelyn back to her room. She walked up to the door, only to hear, from just beyond it in the entryway, the sound of their restless voices and ambiguous wet noises. That last bit of hope vanished without a trace. Edith didn't break down the door. She was already disheveled enough and didn't want to put herself in an even more embarrassing situation. Covering her mouth to suppress the sobs that were about to escape, she stumbled out of the hotel. That night, Edith sat on the sofa, staring blankly out the window the entire night. Scenes of what might have happened later in that room kept flashing through her mind, and the heartache was beyond words. The next day, Jacob finally returned home, his clothes crumpled beyond recognition with unidentified stains all over them, his entire body reeking of Evelyn's perfume. Edith, with bloodshot eyes from staying up all night, looked at him. "You slept with Evelyn yesterday." Jacob paused for a moment while loosening his tie, then spoke. "I'm sorry, I was wrong in this matter, but she had consumed something bad yesterday. The effects were strong, and only I could help her. But you still slept together. Do you remember you have a fiancé?" She stood up and walked over to him, her voice trembling and tone somewhat out of control. Jacob didn't sleep all night. His head was aching a bit, so his patience was wearing thin. "I said it was just helping out, and only this once. Don't overthink it. I will definitely marry you. The wedding is about to happen soon. Don't make a scene." After saying this, he turned and left the house, as if he didn't want to face her unreasonable behavior. With the sound of the front door slamming shut, Edith collapsed weakly to the floor. Tears streamed down uncontrollably, yet she laughed. She thought she was truly ridiculous. She clearly knew Jacob only felt responsible for her, so what exactly was she still hoping for? "I don't know how long I sat there." Edith finally fell into a deep sleep on the bed like a walking corpse. She was dragged awake by Jacob, who pulled her all the way to the car, and no matter how she struggled, she couldn't break free. "Jacob, what are you doing?" The car was driven extremely fast by Jacob. His tone was extremely gloomy. "You ask me what I'm doing. I told you not to mess around. Why did you take those bed photos to threaten Evelyn?" Edith was completely baffled. "I didn't do anything like that. If not you, then who?" This afternoon Evelyn left her resignation letter and went up to the rooftop. "If anything happens to her, I won't let you off." His voice was gritted with anger. As if he truly hated her to the core. They soon arrived at the hospital, and she was dragged all the way up to the rooftop, where Evelyn was sitting on the edge. The onlookers who wanted to watch were all stopped downstairs, leaving only the three of them on the rooftop. Jacob looked nervously at Evelyn, speaking softly. "Evelyn, I brought her here. She'll promise not to release the photos. Please come down, it's dangerous up there." He didn't even give Edith a chance to explain before deciding it was her. Her heart felt as if pierced by countless needles as she said coldly, "I told you it wasn't me." Evelyn stood up, her eyes showing just the right amount of heartbreak. "Teacher, if those photos get out, my reputation will be ruined. What would be the point of living then?" Jacob was panicking terribly, pulling Edith closer as he slowly approached, his voice trembling. "Evelyn, don't be impulsive. I won't let the photos get out." He comforted her, then moved closer and closer until only 2 steps remained. While Evelyn was off guard, he released Edith and pulled her, causing her to fall back into the rooftop area, while Edith, having been bumped, lost her balance and fell directly from the 4th floor. Everything seemed to be in slow motion. Jacob's panicked embrace of Evelyn in his arms deeply pierced her eyes. The feeling of weightlessness was intense. She looked at the azure sky and closed her eyes in despair. The pain was more intense than expected, so much so that she passed out before tears could even fall. When she opened her eyes again, Edith was lying on a hospital bed, her entire body aching as if it were falling apart. She had lost count of how many times she had been hospitalized. Just then, the phone rang. It was the prison guard she had bribed. "Ms. Edith, your mother has been given special treatment in prison." "Did you offend someone?" Edith froze, her breath catching as she stammered. What did you say?" "Someone has given orders to the higher-ups, telling them to take care of your mother. Now she's getting no food inside, being targeted by her cellmates, and forced to spend 10 hours a day outside in the sun." These words struck like a thunderbolt, making her dizzy as the voice from the phone grew increasingly distant. The hospital room door was suddenly pushed open. Jacob walked in. Edith slowly looked up at him, suddenly understanding everything. "You did this." Only Jacob could do these things, especially since he believed it was his own threat to Evelyn. Jacob's face showed no confusion or surprise. She looked at him as if she had never known him before, her voice trembling. "My mother did your family a favor. You can't treat her like this. She's been in poor health for so many years and can't withstand this kind of torment." Jacob approached her, pinched her cheeks. His eyes cold. "She did do our family a favor, but not Evelyn. If you have any grievances, direct them at me. I deserve it all. But why did you have to harm an innocent person again?" By the end of it, Edith's face looked as if it were about to be crushed. With red-rimmed eyes, she stubbornly stared at him. "I didn't take any photos, and I never threatened Evelyn. If you don't believe me, check the surveillance footage at the hotel entrance. If it wasn't you, then who could it be? Evelyn has a gentle personality and has never had conflicts with anyone, only you." He looked at her coldly. No matter how she tried to explain, he was convinced it was her. Edith bitterly tugged at the corner of her mouth, tears sliding from the corners of her eyes, passing over Jacob's hand. He felt the warmth, as if something deep in his heart had been scalded. "All right, I know I was wrong. Please let them spare my mother. I'll stay far away from Evelyn from now on." She lowered her head and conceded, no longer wanting to struggle pointlessly, for it was utterly useless. All she wanted was for her mother to be safe and sound. She still needed to take her away from here. Seeing her soften, Jacob loosened his grip, switching to a gentle caress as his voice softened. "I don't want to hurt Aunt Shan either, but Evelyn is an innocent person. She won't appear in our lives anymore. If you don't want to interact with her, you don't have to, but please don't harm her." Edith felt a light kiss on her forehead. She nodded blankly, like an obedient doll. Yet despite being so obedient, she still couldn't keep her mother. The call from the prison came the next day. She had no memory of the journey there, and before she knew it, she was already in the morgue. On a pulled-out stretcher in the morgue lay her silent, pale mother. Edith collapsed to the ground, her hand trembling as she hesitated to reach out, her voice choked with sobs, tears falling on the cold face. Unable to bring back even a trace of warmth. "Mom, didn't you say you were going to leave with me? Wake up. We were so close to leaving." Why? A prison guard explained from the side. "It was heat stroke. It was too late by the time we found her." That same day, Edith had her mother cremated, and she was the only one at the funeral. Before the funeral began, she made 19 calls to Jacob, all of which went unanswered. Just as she hung up, she saw the latest video in Evelyn's social media feed. It was a scene from a concert, and the person looking down at her with tenderness was none other than the one Edith had been desperately searching for. The video was filled with chaotic noise and flashing lights, reminding her of the time she had invited him to her band's Live House performance, to which he replied, "You know I don't like crowded, noisy places." But now, she was accompanying Evelyn to a crowded concert. Edith smiled self-deprecatingly and didn't make another call. She bought a necklace at the funeral home and carefully placed her mother's ashes inside. "Mom, I'm taking you away." Edith returned home very late. It started raining heavily on the way, and by the time she got home, she was completely drenched. As she opened the door, Jacob was already back. She didn't even glance at him and headed straight upstairs. "Just as I reached the stairwell, I was wrapped from behind by a towel." Jacob asked with a worried tone, "Why didn't you call me to pick you up? You're all soaked. Would you have come if I called?" Edith sneered inwardly, brushed his hand away, and went upstairs. She took a shower in the bathroom, and when she came out, she saw Jacob holding a bowl of ginger soup, blowing on it to cool it down for her. Actually, Jacob is a very responsible person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken care of her for over a decade, to the point where she confused responsibility with love. Noticing her come out, he pulled her to sit by the bed and fed her spoonful by spoonful. Is it too hot? Drink it quickly, the wedding is soon, and you can't catch a cold at a time like this. Edith lowered her eyes and quietly finished drinking, watching his retreating figure as he left. Her heart was filled with utter desolation. Jacob, as you wish, there will be no wedding now. The next day, Edith went out to the immigration department to apply for a visa. Just as she stepped out of the processing hall, she ran into Jacob and a group of interns under him. Jacob glanced at the place she had just walked out of, his brow slightly furrowed. What are you doing here? She calmly replied, someone in the band is going abroad, I'm here to help with the paperwork. He didn't ask any further, because no matter how he thought about it, he would never have guessed that the person going abroad would be Edith. The intern behind her spoke up at that moment. We're having a team dinner today, Mrs. Teacher, why don't you join us? Let's go, we'll head home together later. Jacob chimed in as well. In the end, they ended up at a hot pot restaurant. Edith immediately glanced at Jacob, because in the past, whenever she asked him to join her for hot pot, he would always refuse, saying the smell was too strong. Strange, why would the teacher come to a place like this? The intern standing nearby crossed his arms and remarked, that's because Evelyn likes it, not just hot pot, but stinky tofu noodle stalls and roadside food stalls. As long as Evelyn likes it, the teacher will accompany her. Edith lowered her gaze and curled her lips in a self-mocking smile, saying nothing. After entering, they directly had Jacob and Evelyn sit together. And only then, as if just noticing her, exclaimed in surprise, ah, sorry, I forgot the teacher's wife was here too. At previous gatherings, the teacher always sat with Evelyn. I hope you don't mind, Mrs. A fine, dense pain rose in her heart. She shook her head calmly and sat down across from them. From across the table, she could clearly see Jacob tying the apron for Evelyn, remembering all her preferences to make her dipping sauce, not eating any dishes himself, but cooking food for her. Edith clenched her chopsticks, staring blankly into her bowl. Jacob finally noticed her silence and casually picked up some food for her bowl. Eat more. Looking at the konjac in her bowl, she curled her lips bitterly and pushed the dish aside. Edith had been allergic to konjac since childhood, and had nearly lost her life because of it when she was young. He had forgotten all about it. She kept her head down throughout the entire meal, never once looking up at the person sitting across from her. Until Evelyn suddenly spoke up. Miss Edith, the necklace around your neck is so exquisite. May I take a look at it? Edith suddenly clenched the necklace on her chest tightly. Just as she was about to refuse, the person sitting beside her directly took the chain from her neck and forcefully snatched the necklace away. My teacher's wife wouldn't be so stingy. Evelyn, go ahead and look. She reached out to stop the person, looking at Jacob and said loudly, no. Jacob was displeased by her loud tone and frowned, saying, it's just a necklace, isn't it? What's the harm in letting Evelyn take a look? What did I say before? How dare he bring up the past? Edith watched him reach out to take the necklace and hand it to Evelyn, wanting to snatch it back. Evelyn also reached out as if to decline, saying, since Edith is unwilling, let's just forget about it. Teacher, as the words fell, the necklace slipped from her hand into the pot, splashing broth onto their hands. Edith panicking, she tried to scoop it up but touched the scalding pot bottom. Her sensitive pain receptors made her feel as if her fingers were being severed. In the past, it was always Jacob who provided her with first aid. Her head was throbbing with pain, and she instinctively looked for him, only to see him holding Evelyn's reddened burns, blowing on them with heartache, seeing Evelyn in so much pain that she was about to cry. He immediately took her to the hospital, without even glancing at Edith, who was nearly fainting from the pain. By the time she recovers, the hot pot restaurant will have closed. She asked the shopkeeper to help her fish the necklace out, and when she opened the greasy necklace, the ashes inside had already dissolved into the hot pot. Edith collapsed to the ground, clutching the necklace, her sorrowful cries echoing through the empty hot pot restaurant until her voice grew hoarse. She will never forgive Jacob in this lifetime. That night Edith developed a high fever and lay in a daze for 2 days before gradually regaining consciousness. Sitting by the bedside, Jacob gently touched her forehead as she woke up. Your fever has finally gone down a bit. She kept staring blankly at the ceiling, not saying a word no matter what he said, until he uttered, Edith, don't worry too much. I will definitely cure your throat. Edith shifted her gaze, looked at him, opened her mouth but found she couldn't make a sound, while a burning sensation spread through her throat. Seeing the panic on her face, he patted her and explained, your fever was too severe, causing throat inflammation and vocal cord damage. A minor surgery will fix it. His tone was firm, and Edith gradually felt reassured. 3 days later, Edith had a performance, and she barely managed to sing through the entire show after receiving a cortisone injection. The band members hadn't seen her for days and were all eager to go out for a meal together. But she declined because she was scheduled for surgery the next day. Though disappointed, they didn't press further. We can always get together after that. There will be plenty of opportunities. I'm leaving. Edith looked at them and spoke slowly. My flight is in 5 days. Everyone was stunned by that one sentence, and it took a long moment before someone finally spoke up. But Edith, isn't your wedding in just 6 days? We've all received the invitations. She lowered her head and said, it's not happening. Just pretend you never saw the invitations. Everyone fell silent, because they all knew how much she loved Jacob. Edith smiled faintly and lightly punched the person nearest to her. What's with all of you? They say marriage is a tomb. Shouldn't you be happy I'm not walking into it? Don't worry, I won't give up singing either. After all, it's all I have left now. The last words were barely audible. Seeing her expression that didn't seem fake, they finally relaxed. Then Edith, remember to come back and see us. Don't disappear after you leave. Edith felt a hand grab her, and Jacob's deep voice sounded in her ear. Where are you going? It was Jacob who had come to pick her up. She didn't answer him. After saying goodbye to the band members and getting in the car, he asked again before she replied, I plan to quit the band. Jacob was taken aback for a moment, steering with one hand. Why quit? Didn't you like it? I don't like it anymore, she said flatly. He didn't press further. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. I've already made the arrangements. Edith had assumed by default that Jacob would be performing her surgery, or at the very least a chief physician, so she didn't ask any further questions. It wasn't until she lay on the operating table the next day, after the anesthesia had been administered, that she realized the surgeon in charge was Evelyn. While Jacob stood by assisting her, she cherished her voice too much to ever entrust herself to an intern. Edith panicked and tried to sit up. But the anesthesia left her body weak and her voice fragmented. Change, not her. Jacob, you do it. Jacob gently stroked her face. Be good. Evelyn's thesis requires practical work, and her academic performance is the best. Don't worry, you'll feel better after a good sleep. As these words fell, Edith completely lost consciousness. When she woke up again, she was already in the hospital room, after staring blankly for a few seconds. All the memories from before she fell asleep flooded into her mind. She opened her mouth to speak, but only emitted fragmented, wheezing syllables like a broken bellows. Edith pressed her throat and tried several more times in panic, but there was no improvement. She grew so anxious that her eyes turned red. The hospital room door opened. Jacob walked in, Evelyn following behind him. She looked at him, urgently pointing at her own throat. Jacob averted his gaze for a moment before speaking. There was a slight problem during the surgery, but don't worry, I will definitely cure your voice. Edith widened her eyes, her entire body frozen, as if struck by lightning. A slight problem. If it was just a slight problem, why would he be acting like this? By chance. She met the eyes of Jacob's Evelyn standing behind him, which were full of provocation and smugness. Disbelief flashed in her eyes. Before the photo blackmail incident came to light, Edith hadn't been without suspicion of her. But she thought a girl wouldn't go so far as to orchestrate such a scheme herself. But now it seemed it was all her doing. Because of her, her mother was gone. Because of her, her own voice was ruined. Rage surged from the depths of her heart, and Edith grabbed a nearby ornament and threw it. Jacob frowned, stepping aside to shield Evelyn in his arms. Edith, what's wrong with you? Her hands were clenched tightly, her eyes brimming with hatred as she stared at her. She did it on purpose. Jacob frowned even more deeply upon hearing this, his voice turning cold. Surgery always carries risks. What does it have to do with her? Don't just lash out at people whenever you're unhappy. Edith paused for a moment, her gaze slowly shifting to him. His face was full of impatience at her unreasonable behavior. She lowered her head and gave a bitter smile. How could she have forgotten? Without Jacob's unconditional trust, what trouble could Evelyn possibly stir up? In the following days, Edith didn't speak a single word. Jacob came to visit her in the hospital room every day, repeatedly assuring her that he would cure her voice. But she never once looked at him. On the 4th night, she received a flight itinerary and a sum of money sent by Mr. Jonathan on her phone. Edith, take this money and live well with your mother. She didn't tell Mr. Jonathan about her mother's death, not wanting him to worry too much. She simply replied with okay, just after saving the information. Jacob on the sofa spoke up. Edith, I have something going on, so I won't be staying here tonight. I've already scheduled the surgery. It'll be done the day after the wedding. Edith didn't even look up. 10 minutes later, Evelyn posted a moment on social media, with a picture of Jacob watching the fireworks with her. Her hand trembled slightly, and finally, she clicked on Evelyn's profile picture and pressed delete. The next day, when Edith left, the continuous heavy rain had stopped. The sun broke through the clouds and shone on the ground. When she reached the hospital building, she snapped her SIM card in half and threw it into the trash can, and so she walked in the sunlight, alone, toward her new life without Jacob. the day before the wedding. Jacob stayed up on the mountain with Evelyn after watching the fireworks. The next morning, he planned to drop Evelyn off at home and head straight back to the hospital, but as soon as the car reached the city, the person in the passenger seat spoke up. "Teacher, I'm off today, let's go to the aquarium." Suddenly, Jacob thought of Edith in the hospital. The words of refusal were on the tip of his tongue when Evelyn suddenly patted him and said, "Teacher, the aquarium is right there, let's go, okay." Whenever she spoke in that soft voice, he never knew how to refuse her. By the time they finished touring, it was already evening. After sending Evelyn home, he turned to head back to the hospital when a soft hand gently pulled him back. "Teacher, it's too late, stay tonight." His wrist felt warm where she touched him. He hesitated, struggling internally, thinking that tomorrow was the wedding. Just one night, he ultimately stayed. Seeing him agree to stay, Evelyn felt a surge of joy in her heart. She then took a bottle of wine from the cabinet. "Teacher, have a little drink. Tomorrow is Jacob and Edith's wedding." Evelyn knew this. During this time, no matter how she hinted, whether openly or subtly, Jacob acted as if he didn't understand, showing not the slightest intention of cancelling the wedding. Even after sleeping with her that day, he still didn't mention taking responsibility. She couldn't think of any other way, so she could only get him drunk to make him miss tomorrow's wedding. But Jacob had made up his mind to attend the wedding tomorrow, shutting out all unsettling factors. "No more drinking, I have something on tomorrow. Let's call it an early night." After saying that, he took out his phone and walked towards the guest room, leaving Evelyn staring at his retreating figure with gritted teeth. Jacob sent a message to Edith, but received no reply before going to bed. Early the next morning, he went to the hospital and checked his phone, still no reply. She had often forgotten to reply to his messages before, so Jacob didn't think much of it and turned off his phone. Upon arriving at the hospital, he headed straight for the ward. When he opened the door, it was completely empty. He took out his phone and dialed, only to hear the automated message that it was turned off. Gradually, a sense of unease began to rise within him. Jacob suppressing his unease, he walked to the nurse's station and checked, only to find that Edith had been discharged yesterday. That feeling of unease grew stronger, but he comforted himself, thinking she must have gone to the wedding venue early. Sitting in the car, Jacob kept glancing at his watch. It was already getting late, so he urged, "Uncle Wang, please hurry up a bit. If we're late, Edith will get upset. That's just how she is, spoiled since childhood by the Jonathan family, unable to bear the slightest grievance." Thinking of this, Jacob unconsciously let a smile curl at the corners of his lips. With the driver pushing the speed limit, they quickly arrived at the hotel chosen for the wedding. Jacob strode inside, pushing open the heavy doors, only to find the interior bleak and devoid of any wedding atmosphere. Had he not personally selected this venue himself, he might have thought he'd come to the wrong place. A waiter passed by, and he grabbed him abruptly. "Excuse me, wasn't there supposed to be a wedding here today?" "Wedding? I haven't heard anything about a wedding." The waiter looked confused. Jacob's hand went slack, his expression blank. He felt something crumbling in a way he couldn't bear. At a loss, he tremblingly took out his phone and called his father, forcing a casual tone. "Dad, was the venue changed? Why didn't you tell me? Has Edith already gone there?" "Edith? Didn't she leave yesterday already, Mr.?" Jonathan sounded puzzled. These words struck like a bolt from the blue, leaving Jacob's mind completely blank. "Leave? Isn't today the wedding? Didn't you say you weren't having a wedding half a month ago?" Jacob felt as if he couldn't understand the words. Otherwise, how could he have interpreted it as the wedding being cancelled by Edith? When he rushed back to the old house, Mr. Jonathan was sitting on the sofa reading a newspaper. The sound of the front door being forcefully opened made him look over, and when he saw Jacob's appearance, he was momentarily stunned. In the center of the living room, Jacob looked slightly pale, his entire being in a state of intense mental focus, his eyes fixed firmly on his father. He spoke hoarsely. "Dad, what exactly is going on? Where did Edith go, Mr.?" Jonathan snapped back to reality. "Didn't Edith tell you, that child?" "Dad," Jacob urged, "half a month ago, Edith said when she was discharged from the hospital and came here that you two weren't truly in love with each other. And she didn't want to hold each other back. She wanted to call off the wedding and leave with her mother. I thought it wasn't right to bind you two because of our generation's matters, so I agreed, but I never expected this child didn't even discuss it with you." The rest of the words were drowned out by Jacob's sudden ringing in his ears. He collapsed into the sofa, holding his head in his hands, unable to make sense of it all. The incident of crossing the line with Evelyn happened after Edith said she wanted to call off the wedding. He couldn't figure out what reason she might have for cancelling the wedding. Could it really be that she felt they were holding each other back? But if it was the truth, why did his heart ache so much? As if a piece had been brutally carved out. On the sofa, Mr. Jonathan suddenly remembered something and called a servant. Go to my study and bring down the box on the shelf. It was a small wooden box. Mr. Jonathan handed the box to Jacob and said, "This was left by Edith for you." This was sent by Edith to Mr. Jonathan after she finished arranging her mother's funeral. Jacob stared blankly as he took it, his hands trembling as he opened it. Inside was a letter and a clumsily crafted ring made of woven twigs. He gazed at the crude, childish ring for a long while before finally remembering when it was from, when they were 12 years old. Edith was bullied at school and abandoned at the foot of the mountain. That day, he searched for her all day long, his voice growing hoarse from shouting, until he finally found her curled up at the foot of the mountain. Edith, the moment she saw him, she threw herself into his arms and cried uncontrollably. He was at a loss, unsure how to comfort her, until he finally broke off a branch and wove it into a ring, promising her that he would never let anyone bully her again. That casually woven ring had long been forgotten by him, yet unexpectedly, she had kept it until now. Jacob felt as if a barrel of bitter liquid had been overturned in his heart, his entire being filled with bitterness. He took out the letter below, unfolding it completely only after 2 attempts. Jacob, perhaps in your heart, you've always seen my mother and me as people who seek repayment for favors, but I still want to tell you. Whether it was my mother's choice back then or my decision to marry you, it was never about demanding gratitude. You didn't need to go through the trouble of designing those 33 instances of hurt to delay the wedding. If you had told me you had someone you loved, I would have left. I'm sorry for keeping you by my side all these years, preventing you from pursuing true love. Now I give you back your freedom, and finally, I wish you happiness. Jacob held the letter. His mind in complete chaos. Edith had tactfully withdrawn. He was free to pursue Evelyn. Everything was progressing exactly as he had ideally envisioned, so why couldn't he feel even the slightest bit of happiness? Instead, his heart felt as if it were being torn apart. The letter fluttered to the ground. Mr. Jonathan, seeing his utterly devastated expression, picked up the letter with suspicion. The moment he saw the contents clearly, his eyes widened in shock, anger surged within him. And he raised his hand and forcefully slapped the still-dazed Jacob. "What the hell have you done?" He remembered clearly how the wedding had been postponed 33 times. Each time it was postponed, Edith would get hurt. He had always regarded Edith as half a daughter, and it pained him deeply. Never did he expect that all of this was done by his own son. Jacob was slapped so hard his head snapped to the side, his ear ringing. His father's furious voice sounded beside him, muffled as if through a layer of gauze. "I was wondering, Edith, why she suddenly wanted to leave. So it was you who forced her. Are you even human? Edith's mother genuinely wanted to help us, and it was my idea for you two to get married. How did I raise you to resort to such disgusting methods?" He remained silent, bowing his head as he thought about what his father said. He was right, he truly wasn't human. "Go kneel in the ancestral hall. You're not allowed to come out without my order, Mr. Jonathan waved his hand dismissively. Jacob had no objections. He stood up dazedly and walked toward the ancestral hall. The ancestral hall was silent and dimly lit. He knelt upright in the very center, facing the rows of ancestral tablets, his mind in complete disarray. He himself looked down on the things he had done, but at the time, it was as if he was possessed, constantly hurting Edith, thinking she would never find out anyway, and always telling himself it would be the last time. Now that she had truly found out and left without hesitation, he began to feel utterly at a loss. This feeling was unfamiliar to him, because in his heart, he believed his connection to her was only one of duty. If that duty was gone, then he should no longer have any feelings for her. But now that the duty was gone, his emotions surged up instead, threatening to sweep him away in their tide. Time passed, and many scenes flashed through his mind, but they were all about Edith. There was her soft, sweet voice calling him brother when she was little, and her unrestrained laughter as she clung to him when she grew up. When she first came to Jonathan's house, she was very depressed because she was separated from her mother. Mr. Jonathan told him to keep her company, and he did everything he could to make her smile. This habit lasted for a long time, but now, looking back, he suddenly realized that she hadn't laughed like that in a long time. His heart felt as if it were being gripped by a large hand, and a dull pain spread through him, making him bend over uncontrollably. Why does thinking of her hurt so much? Could it be that he has always liked her? To confirm this suspicion, he imagined what he would do if Evelyn married someone else. He might watch her from afar and send his blessings, but if that person were Edith? Just the thought of it made him feel as if he were about to die. Everything was clear now, he had to get her back. Jacob stood up and rushed toward the exit of the ancestral hall, only to be stopped by the bodyguards at the door. Just as he was about to take action, Mr. Jonathan walked over and looked at him sternly. "Are you trying to rebel?" He looked at his father urgently and said, "Dad, let me go out. I need to find Edith and bring her back. I know I was wrong." Let me go and atone for my mistakes, I beg you, mister. Jonathan stared at him for a long moment, and only when he saw the determination in his eyes did he wave his hand to have the guards release him. Jacob was freed from restraint and hurried out while pulling out his phone. Jacob, mister. Jonathan called out to him, after you find her, let Edith's wishes take priority. If she is unwilling, you must not force her. His heart ached intensely, and he remained silent, unwilling to respond. Yet he knew that if he didn't agree, his father wouldn't let him leave today. He had no choice but to consent. On the way home, Jacob called his assistant and asked them to look for Edith and her mother. When he arrived home, the house was pitch black. He flipped the switch, and the lights illuminated the surroundings, but he still felt an eerie emptiness. In the upstairs bedroom, he saw Edith's half-unpacked suitcase. Even so, he could tell that she had left behind everything he had given her and the things from Jonathan's family, not taking a single one with her. She intended to draw a clear line with them, or perhaps more precisely, to draw a clear line with him. It felt as if an invisible blade had pierced his heart, each breath bringing a tearing pain. Just then, his phone rang. Jacob was momentarily stunned before quickly answering. Well, have you found her? The assistant spoke with difficulty on the other end. We found that the young lady's identity information has been voided, and Ms. Edith has been certified as deceased. His pupils contracted sharply, his face full of disbelief. What did you say? The assistant repeated it again, and Jacob said in a deep voice, go find out the cause of death quickly, and hurry to locate Edith. He knew her mother was very important to her, which was exactly why he wanted to find her quickly. He didn't dare imagine how she would face all this alone. And at the thought, a sharp pain shot through his chest. All night long, Jacob didn't sleep a wink, anxiously waiting for news. Morning arrived, but instead of dawn breaking through the horizon, it was weighed down by dark clouds, as if a heavy rain was about to come. The phone on the coffee table, plugged into its charger, lit up, its ringtone sounding like a death knell. At the same time, the rain that had been held back all night finally began to fall. In the dim light, Jacob stared at the vibrating phone but hesitated to answer it, because he sensed that this phone call would bring him, and her, a pain that could never be undone in this lifetime. Finally, just 1 second before the call ended, he picked it up. Although he was somewhat prepared, when the truth came crashing down on him, he was still caught off guard. Mr. Jacob, Ms. Edith died of heatstroke on July 23rd. The cause was standing too long under the scorching sun. By the time she was found, it was already too late. The timing, the reason, Jacob were all so familiar, because he had caused it all himself. That day, his phone received countless calls from Edith, and what was he doing at the time? He was accompanying Evelyn to a concert. Regret, pain, despair all rushed in at once. The heart-wrenching agony felt like a knife twisting in his chest, making every breath he took tremble through his entire body. The assistant sent the address of the funeral home to Jacob. He rushed over. The rain outside pouring incessantly, the sky gloomy and overcast. Just like that day, he walked up to the front desk and said, I'd like to inquire about someone's ashes. The front desk staff looked up and met a pair of bloodshot eyes, startling them before they stammered, May I ask, what is the name? Jacob hoarsely reported the name. The front desk staff looked it up for a moment and said, This lady's ashes were taken by her family. They are not stored or buried here with us. He was about to ask more when something suddenly caught the corner of his eye. His pupils contracted, his heart pounding wildly. He raised his hand, pointing at the necklace hanging in the back, and heard himself ask, What is that? The receptionist glanced back and said, It's the ashes necklace we offer here. If you don't want to be separated from your loved one, you can keep their ashes inside and wear it with you. The surrounding sounds faded away, leaving only a roaring in his ears. He staggered unsteadily and was caught by his assistant. That necklace was exactly the same as the one Edith had worn, yet at the time, he had treated it so carelessly, even letting it fall into the hot pot. He had never felt as desperate as he did now, as the truth gradually unfolded. He felt the chasm between them growing wider and wider, and all of this was of his own making. Jacob returned home in a daze, finally collapsing to his knees, unable to hold himself up any longer. Darkness engulfed him, filling him with bitter regret. Someone who, in his understanding, couldn't bear the slightest grievance, had endured immense suffering because of him and had never uttered a single complaint. For half a month, he never gave up searching for Edith. But how easy is it to find someone who has already had their identity erased, unless she is willing to appear on her own? But the probability of that is even lower than him finding her himself. One day, Jacob searched the entire house but couldn't find their engagement ring, only then remembering it was in the hospital office. So he went to the hospital during his vacation. As he approached the office door, he heard movement inside. He paused for a moment before remembering that he had previously allowed Evelyn to take naps in his office. Thinking of Edith, he felt it was time to revoke this privilege. Just as he was about to push the door open, he heard her sly voice from inside, completely different from the tone she usually used in front of him. "Thank you for giving me that medicine. It works really well." It's made Jacob completely infatuated. From the phone on speaker, her friend's voice came through. "That move of yours is quite risky. You've ended up putting yourself on the line too," Evelyn said nonchalantly. "Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Besides, what's this compared to what comes next? I think my later move of framing Edith with those photos was truly brilliant. Because of that, they've developed quite a rift between them," a friend praised. "You're the best." Outside the door, Jacob's mind went blank with a buzzing sound, his blood running cold throughout his body. Inside the room, Evelyn sneered, "And that surgery, such a simple procedure, how could I not know how to do it? Now I've finally managed to drive that eyesore away." "But now," a friend said, "Jacob has been on leave for over half a month and hasn't contacted you once. Aren't you afraid he's changed his mind?" She glanced casually at her nails. "His father really likes Edith, so he's definitely keeping him at home to scold him a bit. Once he comes back in a few days, he'll surely start pursuing me properly. Don't worry, when I become Mrs. Yang, I won't forget you." Jacob gripped the doorknob so hard it nearly deformed. Shock at the truth, agony over wronging Edith, and boundless rage surged through him all at once. Inside the room, Evelyn was still lost in her unrealistic fantasies, with a dark expression. He pushed the door open and entered. She heard a sound and turned her head sharply. Recognizing the person, she immediately stood up from her seat in fright, her face instantly turning pale. She began to stammer incoherently, trying to explain. Teacher, I don't." "Evelyn, you're asking for death." Each word was forced out through gritted teeth. The hatred within him was so intense it seemed to overflow, and the murderous aura was so heavy that Evelyn realized he wasn't joking, he would truly kill her. Evelyn's legs suddenly gave way, and she knelt on the floor. The Jacob from before had always spoken to her softly, with endless gentleness, and had never frightened her like this. She wanted to run away, but was Jacob grabbed and thrown to the ground. The memories that followed were something she never wanted to recall for the rest of her life. Jacob locked her in an abandoned warehouse, forced her to take drugs, threw several homeless men inside, took countless photos of her, and her explicit pictures spread everywhere. At that time, Jacob stood just a few steps away from her, his voice cold as ice as he looked at her. "Didn't you say you wouldn't live if these photos got out? Then why haven't you killed yourself yet? There's an abandoned high-rise right over there. Do you need me to take you up?" Evelyn's vocal cords had been destroyed by him, and now she could only make hoarse, guttural sounds. Just as Jacob was frantically trying to kill her, Mr. Jonathan appeared and sternly snapped him out of it. "If you kill someone now, do you want to meet Edith with blood on your hands?" Jacob immediately came to his senses, shaking his head frantically. No, I don't want to." He finally stopped and began searching for Edith with all his might, finally finding her trail 2 months later. After leaving that day, Edith first stayed at her flight destination for 1 day, then went to another place the next day, the place she had originally chosen to stay with her mother. After arriving, she slept like the dead, eating only when she woke up and skipping meals if she didn't. It had been a long time since she had such an unhealthy routine. In the past, there was always Jacob keeping her in check, but now she could do as she pleased. After Edith had slept her fill, she took the salvaged necklace to the seaside. There was a bit of ash left inside the necklace, and she threw it, necklace and all, into the sea. "Mom, I'm sorry. I couldn't even protect your ashes for you. I'm useless. You were trapped in prison for over a decade, but now I'm setting you free in the ocean. From now on, be free." Her voice was still hoarse, a tear sliding down the corner of her eye. The sea breeze was gentle, like a pair of hands brushing her cheeks, blowing away that tear. Edith touched her cheek, lowered her head, and smiled softly, her voice very light. "I will be free too." It had been a week since the last surgery, but her throat showed no improvement at all. Speaking not only hurt but was also unbearably hoarse. Edith had become quite negative about her voice, somewhat resignedly thinking, "Let it be, I won't treat it anymore. After all, it doesn't affect normal daily life." And so she lived here somewhat emptily for a period of time. One evening, while she was out for a walk, she suddenly came across a band performing by the roadside. Unconsciously, she stopped and watched the entire performance. After one song ended, the singer suddenly noticed her and walked step by step towards her, handing the microphone to her. Would this audience member like to come up and sing a song? Edith was stunned for a moment and quickly waved her hands in refusal, but the person still didn't give up, because they could see that she really loved to sing. There was no other way. Edith had to speak up. "My voice is damaged. I can't sing anymore." The band members noticed that she said she couldn't sing anymore, rather than that she wasn't able to sing, so they smiled and encouraged her. "Even though your voice is damaged, I bet you used to sing beautifully. Don't give up, it can definitely be healed." Watching her retreating figure, Edith paused for a moment, touched her own throat, and returned to the hotel in silence. After thinking it over all night, she decided to heal her voice, because she realized she still loved singing very much and didn't want to give up on this dream. Edith hung up the most recent number, and after a long examination, the doctor looked at her X-ray with a deeply furrowed brow. "Your vocal cords don't seem to be damaged externally. It looks more like they were damaged after being cut open." Although this statement was terrifying, it was the truth. That day, Edith already knew it was Evelyn who had done it intentionally. She remained silent, saying nothing. The doctor didn't press further and regretfully put down the X-ray. "The damage is very severe, we can't treat it here." Before Edith could feel disappointed, the doctor added, "But I have a friend who specializes in this field. He might have a solution, though he's in another country. If you don't mind the trouble, you could go see him." As he spoke, he took a business card with an address written on it from his drawer. The name on it read Luther. Edith took it and thanked him. After returning home, she thought it over all night and still decided to go. She had nothing left to hold her back. Anywhere could be home. On the day before she was set to leave, she spotted Jacob downstairs. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he looked utterly haggard. Edith had no idea how he had found her, but she had no intention of meeting him now, so she made a call from outside, asking the hotel to check her out and bring her luggage to her. After collecting her luggage, she went straight to the airport, changed her ticket to the earliest available flight, and left the place. Meanwhile, Jacob was still waiting downstairs, waiting for his assistant to send him the confirmed room number. The moment he received it, he rushed upstairs, only to find the room empty. After 2 months of sleepless searching, the trail had grown cold again. Jacob stood rooted to the spot in despair. At the closest point he had been to Edith in these 2 months, Edith arrived at the airport the next morning. This time, instead of checking into a hotel, she found a house to settle in, freshened up, and then went to the address on the business card to find the doctor. It was a private hospital with a pleasant environment. She presented the business card at the front, bypassing the registration process entirely, and was escorted directly to Luther's consultation room. The nurse gestured for her to sit on the sofa. "Dr. Luther is currently doing his rounds. Please wait here for a moment." Edith nodded and looked around. It was a large yet very simple consultation room. Just as she was completely absorbed in looking around, a magnetic voice sounded. "I don't remember having any patients this afternoon." Turning around, she saw a tall figure walking in. As he took a pen from the outer pocket of his white coat, he said this, his peach blossom eyes briefly resting on her. The nurse who happened to be coming in to get water for Edith said, "This young lady came with your business card. You said yourself that the card is a pass, so I brought her directly to you." Luther suddenly remembered. "Oh right, thanks then." The nurse waved her hand and went out, closing the door behind her, leaving only the two of them inside for a moment. Edith was staring at his face in a daze, because he was really too good-looking. Unlike Jacob's handsomeness, he was truly beautiful. Luther sat down behind the desk, watching her mesmerized expression, and narrowed his eyes slightly, teasing. "You're about to burn a hole through me." She suddenly snapped back to reality, her cheeks burning as she walked over and sat down opposite him. She took out the business card and placed it on the table. "Dr. Black sent me. My vocal cords are quite severely damaged." Luther also set aside his teasing demeanor and began to examine her seriously. After reviewing the scans, he indeed said the same thing as Dr. Black. "Your vocal cords were damaged after being cut." As he spoke, he looked at Edith. His expression dark and unreadable. She lowered her head without making eye contact with him and remained silent, not answering. Luther didn't press further and had a treatment plan ready for her within the day. Edith held the prescription, her eyes widening slightly. "Can it be cured?" Luther leaned over the desk, supporting himself with one hand as he pointed at the precautions on the prescription with his index finger. "That depends on whether you follow them properly, otherwise. I can't guarantee anything." The crisp scent of pine washed over her, making her momentarily dazed. "I'll follow them." After that, there was a treatment period lasting over half a year. She went to the hospital on time according to the treatment plan, and gradually her throat showed significant improvement. Feeling very grateful, she bought a gift and wanted to give it to Luther. He looked at the item in front of him and pushed it back with one hand. "If it's out of gratitude, there's no need to give it. Our hospital doesn't accept gifts. But if you really want to give it, how about using another reason, like my birthday?" Edith looked confused for a moment upon hearing this, but she also knew he wouldn't accept it today. The final treatment session was a surgery. Because the previous surgery had made her fearful, she started feeling nervous the day before the operation. Lying on the operating table, she grew even more nervous, her face turning pale and her entire body trembling slightly. "Luther, with only a pair of peach blossom eyes visible above his mask, leaned close to her, his gaze filled with tenderness. "Don't be nervous, I won't let anything happen to you. Although all surgeries carry risks, in my hands, the success rate is 100%. She gradually relaxed. After the surgery, Edith stayed in the hospital for a few days before being discharged, and her voice returned to normal, by chance. She joined a band where there was a younger sister named Heather, who loved sticking close to her and was the one who pulled her into the group. Because she had experience, they soon landed a small gig at a bar. Standing on stage again after a year, Edith felt as if she had finally found herself again, and her smiles grew much more frequent. After the performance, she hadn't quite snapped out of the atmosphere when she suddenly heard Heather shouting from the side, "Bro, what are you doing here? You never come to my shows." Edith was intently watching the path under her feet without looking up, until she heard a familiar voice. "Don't worry, I'm not here to see you." She froze for a moment, looked up and saw Luther standing in the corridor with one hand in his pocket. After saying this, his peach blossom eyes shifted and landed on Edith beside him. "I'm here to check how my patient is recovering." A faint smile played at the corners of his mouth. Heather followed his gaze to the person beside her. "So you know each other?" Edith never expected Heather to be Luther's sister. Because of this connection, Heather often invited her to meals, and would bring Luther along. Over time, they became more familiar with each other. Half a year later, Edith and her band participated in a competition and ultimately won first place. The prize was a pendant. She wanted to give this to Luther. After all, it was thanks to him that she was able to return to the stage, but when she stood before him, she hesitated, because she remembered Jacob's past reaction, and couldn't bring herself to speak up. Luther glanced at her, took the pendant from her hand, and held it up to look. "For me," Edith nodded. He smiled and immediately hung the item on his phone. It settled then, no backing out. Seeing how genuinely pleased he looked, she felt a sense of relief. What one person discards, another treasures. In the evening, Luther offered to treat everyone to a meal. No one in the band declined, all saying, "Thank you, brother." The group filed out in a lively crowd. Edith was talking to Heather when she casually glanced up and saw Jacob standing just a meter away from the entrance. She stood frozen in place, never expecting to see him again. Amid the surrounding noise, they gazed at each other. Jacob's eyes were filled with excitement and glistening tears. Ever since he had come up empty-handed last time, he had lost all trace of her. It wasn't until recently, Edith's band gained recognition outside, that he finally got news of her again and rushed over without delay. Edith stood frozen in place, wondering why he had come looking for her, unable to think of a reason. She concluded it must be a coincidence. Heather, who was nearby, noticed and asked in confusion, "Sister Edith, do you know him?" She snapped back to reality and shook her head. "No, I don't." Then, as they followed the others out, the group passed by Jacob, who called out in a daze, "Edith." Edith paused for a moment in her steps, then walked away without looking back. But Jacob stood frozen in place, not daring to chase after her, only able to watch as she grew further and further away. Over the past year, he had imagined countless scenarios of their reunion, but when it actually happened, he was afraid she would hate him, and afraid she would treat him like air. But seeing that her voice had recovered, and the wounds he had caused left no trace, the despair in his heart seemed to lessen a little. Because there were too many people, they split into two cars. Edith and Heather are riding in Luther's car, while the others are taking a taxi. She sat in the passenger seat due to motion sickness, while Heather in the back was still looking outside, muttering, "That guy just now was so handsome." Although he looked a bit haggard on the surface, he couldn't hide his good looks. "I really wanted to get his contact information." Edith remained silent, and Luther, noticing her silence, responded to the person in the back, "Would you just shut up? The guys you think are handsome must number at least 90, if not 100. I don't know what's wrong with your eyes." Immediately, Heather's attention was diverted, and she forgot all about Jacob, focusing entirely on bickering with Luther. Edith gazed at the rapidly receding tree shadows outside the window, her mind filled with the sound of Jacob's voice from earlier. There was no surprise in his tone, which meant it wasn't a coincidence. So why had he come looking for her? So much time had passed by now, he and Evelyn should have gotten married already. Which made it even more inappropriate for him to seek her out. After thinking about it the entire way without reaching any conclusion, she simply decided to stop dwelling on it. After all, whatever it was had nothing to do with her anymore. Throughout the meal, Edith remained absent-minded. After finishing dinner, she got into the car. Luther first dropped Heather off at home, then drove off in another direction. That's when she realized this wasn't the way home. Puzzled, she asked, "Where are we going?" Luther kept one hand on the steering wheel. "Taking you to clear your mind. You've seemed pretty stressed lately." Edith was taken aback for a moment, thinking, "Have I?" But upon reflection, it had been too long since her last performance, and her throat had just recovered. Before the competition, she practiced every day, terrified of making a mistake. She hadn't expected Luther to notice, and her heart warmed. Luther took her to a go-kart club where the staff clearly knew him, letting them in even though it was already past closing time. After a few laps, Edith felt genuinely more relaxed. The emotions bottled up since seeing Jacob again had completely dissipated. After it was over, he drove her home. As she got out of the car, Edith suddenly said, "Thank you for today, Luther." He crossed his hands on the steering wheel, leaning his whole body forward, and turned his head to look at her. "You're my patient, of course I have to take responsibility." She lowered her head and smiled, not mentioning that psychological issues weren't within his scope of treatment. After getting out of the car, she bent down and waved at him through the window before heading upstairs. This unexpected encounter with Jacob she considered just a minor episode, assuming they probably wouldn't meet again. But during Edith's next performance, she spotted Jacob in the audience. She froze for a moment. But with no time to ponder, she began her performance. Jacob sat in the best seat below, his gaze fixed intently on the person on stage. Back when he still had her, he had never once gone to watch. Now, he could only sit among the audience, holding a status no different from the countless others. Watching her who seemed so far out of reach, his heart ached with a dense, piercing pain. As the performance ended, Edith walked offstage with her teammates toward the back dressing room. Just after turning the corner, she saw Jacob standing by the door. His eyes were fixed purposefully on her, while the oblivious Heather beside her, failing to notice the tension, excitedly grabbed her hand. Once they entered the dressing room, Heather excitedly spoke up. "Why is that handsome guy here too? Is this fate? This time I must." "Heather, I'm going out for a moment." Edith gently patted her arm to interrupt her. She walked out, passing by Jacob without pausing. Heading straight toward the corridor at the corner, Jacob's eyes lit up as he watched her approach, and then he followed her to the corner. Edith stopped and turned around, speaking indifferently. "Mr. Jonathan sent you to find me," because she couldn't think of any other reason. Jacob was momentarily stunned by her words, then hurriedly explained upon regaining his composure. "No, I came to find you on my own initiative. What do you want?" Edith took a step back and said coldly. Watching her distant and wary demeanor felt like a knife twisting in his heart, bitterness churning endlessly within him. His eyes were filled with sorrow and pleading. "Edith, come back with me." Still trying to repay a favor, Edith looked at him coldly. "No need, that debt has been settled. You should leave, we've long been even." After saying this, she tried to walk past him but was stopped by a large hand grabbing her. "It's not about repaying a favor." He hurriedly grabbed her, eagerly trying to hold her back. "I truly just want you to come back. I was too foolish, I didn't realize my own feelings until I lost you." Edith frowned deeply, the touch on her hand making her uncomfortable, so she used a bit of force to break free. Jacob felt his hand suddenly empty. As if a piece of his heart had collapsed, like countless tiny needles piercing through it. He lowered his head, staring at his empty palm, his voice full of bitterness. "Edith, I love you, not out of gratitude. All the habits I've had toward you since childhood came from love. Before, I didn't understand this truth. I distorted my own feelings because I didn't want to be tied down, and ended up hurting you so much. I'm sorry. Every day after you left, I've been filled with regret. Please give me a chance to make it up to you." The more she listened, Edith the paler her expression became. When he finished, she let out a scornful laugh. How dare he speak of love to her? Jacob froze completely, his heart feeling as if it had been torn in two, leaving him struggling to breathe. She looked amusedly at the person in front of her, who was clearly tall and imposing yet had become so diminished. "Jacob, you've just confused gratitude with love, this time." She returned to the dressing room without any hindrance. Heather, seeing her return, excitedly rushed over. "Edith, you know that handsome guy?" Seeing Edith's expression, her face changed, and she quickly shifted her tone. "Edith, what's wrong? Did that person bully you? I'll go teach him a lesson." Edith reached out and pulled back the person who was about to charge out. "All right, I'm fine." Heather reluctantly stayed put, but still observed her from time to time. As they left the dressing room, Jacob was still waiting at the door, though his face looked much paler than before. After getting in the car, Heather couldn't hold back and asked softly, "Edith, who is he?" Edith gripped the steering wheel and said casually, "My ex-fiancé." "Ex-fiancé?" Heather exclaimed in surprise. "How did he become an ex? He must have wronged you. He looks decent on the outside, but who would have thought he's a scumbag?" It was during the red light interval. Seeing that she no longer had the infatuated expression she had earlier when facing Jacob, Edith laughed out loud while holding the steering wheel. "Edith, what are you laughing at?" Heather was utterly confused. She started the car, a smile still lingering in her voice. I just remembered how you were just saying how handsome he was a moment ago, Heather said. No matter how handsome someone is, if they treat Edith badly, they're just ugly. Edith was momentarily stunned upon hearing this. A warm feeling surging in her heart, she once again felt grateful to fate for letting her meet them. After seeing Heather home, Edith then returned to her own place. After finishing all her nightly routines, she lay in bed thinking about the love Jacob had spoken of. Unable to hold back, she laughed out loud once more. Jacob saying he loved her was an insult to the word. The next day, there was no performance, and the originally scheduled practice was cancelled. Edith read the announcement in the group chat, tossed her phone aside, and stared at the ceiling, realizing she had nothing to do besides practicing and performing. Just as a sense of emptiness began to surface, Luther called, "No rehearsal today, right? I'll come pick you up and take you out for a stroll." Edith figured she had nothing better to do anyway, so she agreed. She got out of bed, slowly got herself ready, and by the time she went downstairs, Luther was already waiting there. She paused for a moment, then quickly walked over and sat in the passenger seat. "Have you been waiting long? I should have been faster." Luther started the car nonchalantly. "For you, I'm very patient. You can come down whenever you want." Lately, he's always been saying ambiguous things like this. Edith had almost gotten used to it. She smiled and said, "All right then, I'll take a nap before coming down next time." Even then, he didn't get angry at all. No problem. Throughout the day, Luther acted as a tour guide, taking her around the area. She had been here for a year but had never explored it. In the evening, he took her to a restaurant by the sea. As they entered the private room, Edith looked at the large table with several seats, paused for a moment, then turned and said, "Just the two of us don't need." At that moment, the lights in the room were turned off, and a warm yellow glow appeared at the door. Then, Heather was seen walking slowly toward her with a birthday cake, with Luther standing beside her. Then came the sudden chorus of the birthday song, from the band members. She had completely forgotten that today was her birthday, a dazed look flashing in her eyes. "Happy birthday, Edith, Edith, happy birthday, Edith." The lights came on, and she looked at them with moist eyes. "Thank you." While eating, Edith suddenly remembered what Luther had said to her today. So she patted the hand of Heather, who was happily eating beside her. "Heather, does your brother always talk to others so ambiguously?" Heather was enjoying her meal and didn't realize the implication behind the question, casually replying, "His words can be infuriating, ambiguous. I'd consider it a blessing if he can just speak properly." Edith looked somewhat surprised upon hearing this, her eyes wandering aimlessly until they were suddenly locked by a pair of eyes filled with mischief. She immediately lowered her head and picked at the food in her bowl, only then realizing she had no reason to avoid him. Her cheeks instantly burned with heat. After the meal, everyone went to the connected karaoke area to sing, leaving only her and Luther at the table. Suddenly, Luther glanced at his watch and abruptly pulled her onto the balcony. She asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" He looked down at her and said with a smile, "There are fireworks." Edith's eyes lit up, and she turned to call them to come watch together, but was pulled back. "These are just for you, no need to call them." She froze for a moment, gazing into the eyes so close to hers, her heart pounding wildly. Bang! The fireworks exploded, and she immediately turned her head toward them, her hair swinging and just covering her flushed ears. The fireworks were dazzlingly brilliant, and everyone on the beach stopped to watch. Gradually, she too became captivated. Forgetting the erratic heartbeat from moments before, as the fireworks faded, a magnetic voice sounded beside her. "Luther, I'm not the kind of person who says things lightly. Those words, I only say them to someone I like." That one sentence kept her awake the entire night. Luther as always. He saw her home just like every other time. But she felt something was different this time. When she got out of the car, he handed her a gift box, a birthday present. She walked faster than usual from the entrance of the residential area to her building because she couldn't wait to get home and open the gift. But when she reached her building and saw Jacob, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. She stood in place watching him from afar, Jacob holding a cake and a gift, walking toward her. Nervously, he held the gift out to her. His voice hoarse as he spoke, "Happy birthday, Edith. I said I would spend every birthday with you. Glad I didn't miss it." Indeed, he had never missed any of her past birthdays. Jacob, even when he was busy with a full day of surgeries, he would squeeze out time to celebrate her birthday. Even if it meant staying up all night to perform surgery, he never missed one. But that was all in the past. Edith took the gift he offered, and before Jacob could show any sign of joy, she casually tossed it into the nearby trash can. His face instantly turned pale, his heart gripped by an invisible hand, making it hard for him to breathe. She spoke coldly, "You don't need to bear this useless responsibility anymore. Stay away from me," Jacob said bitterly. "It's not because of responsibility. Edith, I'm sorry. I really know I was wrong, and I truly regret it." Please give me another chance. I will definitely do better than before. On what grounds? She interrupted him coldly. The air was quiet for a few seconds. Edith sneered and walked past him with the gift in her arms. Watching her retreating figure, Jacob stood frozen below all night. A few days later, Edith had some paperwork that required her to return to her home country, and Jacob coincidentally was on the same flight as her, and just happened to be seated right next to her. She couldn't be bothered to pay attention to his meaningless actions, and remained silent with her eyes closed throughout the entire flight. Jacob he watched her close her eyes as soon as she boarded the plane, thinking she was too tired and had fallen asleep, so he stayed quiet and didn't disturb her. It wasn't until he saw her open her eyes precisely after the plane landed that he realized she simply didn't want to have any communication with him, and a fine, sharp pain welled up in his heart. After exiting the terminal, Edith stood by the roadside ready to hail a taxi. Jacob followed closely behind, eagerly saying, "Edith, where are you going? Let me give you a ride. It's hard to get a taxi here." She expressionlessly got into the taxi she had hailed, leaving him alone where he stood. After finishing her tasks, she went to Jonathan's family old residence the next day. This should be her last time returning to her home country. She wanted to see Mr. Jonathan one last time. In the study, Edith and Mr. Jonathan sat facing each other. Mr. Jonathan was filled with guilt and heartache. "I never expected that scoundrel to do such things. I failed in raising my son properly." "Edith, you've been wronged," she said softly. "His actions were his own choices. They have nothing to do with you. You will always be my most respected Mr. Jonathan." Mr. Jonathan felt even more heartache. "All right then, stay for dinner tonight. After you leave, no one will eat with me anymore. This old man will be quite lonely all by himself." Edith would naturally not refuse. Just then, a knock came from outside the door. "Sir, the young master has returned." Mr. Jonathan immediately glared with fury. "What is he back for? Drive him out," the servant said with difficulty. "We tried, but he insists on staying. He's already knocked out 3 bodyguards." Mr. Jonathan slammed the table forcefully. "Call all the bodyguards over. I refuse to believe this." The servant turned to leave. Edith stopped her. "Let him in." Meeting Mr. Jonathan's expression, she reassured him, "It's all right. Don't let anger harm your health." While helping Mr. Jonathan downstairs, Jacob was walking in disheveled, standing below staring at her blankly. This scene felt all too familiar. Countless times before, Edith had supported Mr. Jonathan as he descended the stairs. In his days, he almost believed she had returned, that none of it had ever happened, and that they still had a future together. In the past, she would have immediately turned her gaze to him, smiling as she spoke. But now, no matter how intensely he stared, Edith treated him as if he were invisible. Those events had indeed occurred, she would not return, and they had no future. This realization pierced Jacob's heart like an invisible blade, each breath bringing a tearing, searing pain. At dinner, Jacob sat across from Edith, his eyes burning as he stared at her, occasionally serving her the dishes she liked. She didn't even look up once, focusing on her conversation with Mr. Jonathan, and directly picked out the food placed in her bowl into the waste plate. After the meal, Edith accompanied Mr. Jonathan in conversation for a while before saying goodbye. Throughout this time, Jacob remained quietly on the side. As soon as she finally got up and left, he immediately chased after her. Edith knew he had chased after her, and without stopping her steps, she walked to the garden of the villa area and came to a halt. She crossed her arms and looked back at the person who had urgently followed her. "If you have something to say it here. After you've said it, don't bother me again." Jacob felt a sudden pang in his heart. He realized that they seemed to be truly reaching the end, and all the unease and despair in his heart surged up. He bent his back and frantically grabbed her by the shoulders. "Edith, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I can't lose you. I really can't live without you. I know I was wrong. I beg you, please give me a chance to make it right." Edith met his bloodshot eyes with undisturbed calm. "Jacob, what's done is done. No matter how you try to make amends, the dead won't return, and I won't forgive you." Jacob searched her eyes, desperately trying to find a glimmer of hope, but no matter how hard he looked, he found only still, unrippled water. He finally broke down, tears falling like rain. He dropped to his knees and clutched at her tightly, as if by doing so he could truly hold on to the person who was about to leave. "Don't go, Edith, I beg you. Please, could you love me one more time? Please." She looked down at the person kneeling and weeping before her, feeling only pity. She had loved him, and he had loved her, but they had never truly loved each other. Was there a winner in this relationship? The answer was no. In the past, she was the loser. Now, he was the loser. "Jacob, let me go," that was all she said. He used to grant all her requests, but now, faced with this one demand he would rather die than agree to, the only thing he could do was comply, because she asked him to let her go. She told him to let her go, so how could he not do as she said? Jacob's hands gradually loosened their grip. Edith turned away without a hint of hesitation, leaving the person behind to helplessly hold themselves and weep. The next day, early in the morning, Edith returned, and this time, there was no one by her side who shouldn't have been there. After landing, as soon as she walked out of the jet bridge, she spotted Luther in the crowd. She paused for a moment, then quickly walked over. "What are you doing here?" He took the suitcase from her hand. "Of course, I have a spy." Edith smiled. "Tell me, what did you bribe Heather with this time? Isn't she just into money and handsome guys?" He opened the passenger door for her, waited for her to get in, then leaned lazily against the door, grinning at her. "Someone so easily bribed, wouldn't it be better if you just told me these things directly from now on? What do you think?" They all knew perfectly well what lay behind this. Edith was momentarily stunned, but fortunately Luther didn't actually expect an answer. It felt more like a probe. On Valentine's Day, after finishing rehearsal with her bandmates, just as she was about to head home, Heather suddenly pestered her to go for a walk by the seaside. She could never win against her, so she had no choice but to go along. Only after arriving and seeing the setup on the beach did she realize it had been arranged in collusion with Luther. When they were about 2 meters away, Heather didn't follow anymore. Instead, she said, "Edith, I really like you. I hope you can become my sister-in-law." Then she turned and ran off. Edith gave a helpless smile and walked closer to Luther. She gently touched the surrounding flowers and said, "I remember you weren't the type who likes such grand, dramatic gestures." He was also holding a bouquet of flowers, more exquisite and vibrant. "I don't like them, but I like anything that makes you happy, and I'm even more willing to do so." Once again, Edith understood that principles are worthless in the face of someone you love. "I used to know it would ache my heart, but now I know it's filled with overflowing love." Luther stood before her, presenting the flowers in his hand, and upon closer look, they seemed to tremble slightly. "Edith, I never believed in love at first sight until I met you. Will you be my girlfriend?" When she heard the words love at first sight, Edith was stunned. But then she remembered Heather's comment about Luther's way of speaking, and it all seemed to make sense. As she was lost in thought, Luther mistook her silence for hesitation, and his heart was in turmoil. Edith finally came back to her senses, took the bouquet, stood on her toes and gently kissed the corner of his mouth. "I do." Luther was stunned for a moment, then pulled her into a deeper kiss. Fireworks burst over the sea, their brilliant colors reflecting on their faces. Edith wrapped her free arm around him in return. She would always believe in the existence of love, and always have the courage to love, because we dare to love, we receive love in return. The end. The end.